Find out more and take your browser over to supertalktv.com. You'll see I'm not alone in the studio today. I have with me author and owner of Dogwood Press, Joe Lee, and he is rolling back the time to the 1980s. Isn't that nice? In his latest Oakdale thriller. So welcome, Joe.
Rebecca, it's good to be with you.
This is number 7?
Number 9 overall, and the 7th of the Oakdale series.
All right. So first off, take me back to 1980. What are we doing? What are we not doing there in the book?
1984 is the year I chose for this book, and it has nothing to do with the George Orwell novel of the same name. I've already been asked that multiple times, but no George Orwell here. Oakdale, Rebecca, is a fictional place, northeast Mississippi. I call it Smart County, not far from real-life Tupelo. Think little towns like Ripley, Pontotoc, New Albany. Mm-hmm. Places where a lot of folks have been in that area for generations, families who own businesses on the squares, the sons and the daughters and the grandkids are now running them. Everybody knows everybody's business, and there's lots of crime, there's lots of old money, everybody's business.
And that makes for great storytelling.
It does.
And even though Oakdale is a fictional place, it's somewhere that you created, Joe, in your head. I love when you say a gossipy little town. I feel like everyone listening to Good Things is going to go, man, Oakdale's after my small town. Because there are some just very lots of things that are the same through all small towns and small communities. There's a lot of good that comes out of it, but there's just, a lot that comes with everybody knowing everybody.
Oh, yeah. First day at a new place and there's a knock on the door and, don't you work for so-and-so? Yeah, I just started with them this morning. But it's fun. And I grew up in Starkville. And in 1984, I was almost 19 years old, and a traffic stop that I went through in real life is what I started this book with. Now, later in the story, you're going to meet a character I brought back from my 2014 novel, Director's Cut. He is a veteran sheriff in Director's Cut. He is a deputy in this book, and he's the one person I went way almost up to present day for to yank back and stick him in there at a much younger age. But he is confided in by the veteran sheriff he works for that there's stuff in the other side of the county, a crime, a scam, a big thing involving a lot of people, some very powerful folks all over the state making a lot of money. And he said, look, kid, there's already been a death. I'm going to be forced out of office. That's not for public broadcast yet, but I think you'd make a fine sheriff. Before this young deputy can really get his mind around that, the incumbent sheriff disappears without a trace. So the youngster who is stopped at the beginning of the book and the deputy sheriff who we enter later in the story, their worlds come together down the stretch of the book. But one thing, Rebecca, I love about writing fiction is putting good people into difficult situations where they have to make choices and they, you dive into the big creek and see what happens. And this deputy, all of a sudden at about age 25, has a lot of weight on his shoulders. What does he do with the information he's gotten from this incumbent sheriff who's disappeared? Is that sheriff going to come back? Is he going to be back tomorrow? Will he be back a month from now? Is he coming back at all? And who can this deputy sheriff trust? People in the office? And one thing I did, which gave me a great deal of enjoyment, was to spend a lot of time with, in real life, the retired Oktibbeha County Sheriff, Dolph Bryant. I grew up there, and he was already sheriff, when I was in grade school, and served until, I think, 2008. And he was so generous with his time. And we talked for a long time one day early in 2020. And then we talked again about a year ago for another hour and a half. And I threw everything I could at him to put the sheriff's deputy in a position where he could possibly stamp out the crime ring. How might he go about doing that? Who would he get involved with first? What law enforcement entity? But also thinking about the 19-year-old kid who's got a lot going on in his life. Without giving away too much of the book, there's a lot that I got from Dolph, and then a lot that I got from a friend of mine from this area who has the FBI and the U.S. Attorney's Office on his resume. And that gentleman and I talked through making what was going to be a statewide crime scene a federal thing, where federal charges could be brought against the people that the young sheriff's deputy is going to try to bring down.
Joe, is it fair to say that as you're writing a novel like The Resting Place, and I want to get into how all 7 of them sort of fit together, right? Like how the stories sort of keep unfolding or sort of going if we haven't read one, or maybe we've read few, or maybe this is our first introduction to it. While you're doing your research, is the story not finished yet, or is it like still mulling over? Like, do you have this big umbrella idea of what you kind of want, or, the foundation of where the story can go, and then you're filling in the pieces? Or as you're researching, talking to these retired sheriffs or these people in the FBI, or just understanding North Mississippi better, all that, does it then start to flesh itself out? Like, what comes first, the chicken or the egg?
What comes first usually is an outline from start to finish. And I know where the book is going. This time was different. I worked on a couple of endings before I arrived at the one that's in the book. But you ask a great question, and I leave myself enough wiggle room to adapt based on, for example, conversations with that sheriff or my friend who worked for the FBI and the U.S. Attorney's Office. And if either one of them had said, you can do this, and you can do this, and you can do this, and it would all be feasible, but if you try this, folks are going to throw the book across the room because it just couldn't happen, then maybe I have to go in a different direction.
But it's fiction. I feel like we all watch certain things like Law and Order, or maybe, even some of the other ones. And I know they say they're based on headlines, but they're still fictional stories. I think, doesn't the reader give you a little bit of grace for not knowing what they don't know about the, law enforcement?
Yes, and that's a great point. There is a line I think fiction writers can cross if they aren't well-versed enough on their subject matter, where they just get stuff plain wrong. If you're writing a medical thriller, for example, part of your audience that reads the book may be people that work right in that area, maybe in forensics, and somebody reads something and says, I'm sorry, this just flat wouldn't happen, file 13, here comes a big book I paid $28 for. I don't want that to happen, but that's one of the things I talk to the retired sheriff about a lot. Is this feasible? Am I stretching this? And he said, you're stretching a little bit, but yeah, everything you're laying out, Joe, could happen. And I said, that's what I want to hear.
Where did you get your interest in crime stories or thrillers? Because it takes a level of knowledge just to even know how those pieces, go together. I mean, I could sit here and drum up a fictional crime scene maybe, or suspicions, but then going through the pieces of trying to write out what the right agencies or authorities would do, I would have no idea where to start.
The best way I can answer that is putting together crime stuff interests me. I've always enjoyed watching the original Law and Order. I watch Forensic Files. Sometimes I wonder why my wife is still married to me after I watch all the stuff that I do, but that's always interested me. I've always had an interest in psychology and family dynamics, and there's lots of dysfunction in folks' lives. There's no question about that.
Amen.
Some way more than others. But in layering in the characters in this book, the Myrick family has a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes, and they're good people, but there's a lot of stuff that's weighing on the 19-year-old kid's shoulders. And his life really takes a turn right in the middle of the book. And both he and the deputy, Billy Joe Stone, have a lot on their shoulders. Their paths are going to come together down the stretch. But trying to circle back to what you asked about the crime part of it, I will determine where I want to go and try to find an expert or two, somebody with a lot of, career in that area. Hi, my name's Joe. I'm a flunky author, and I'd like to a few minutes of your time and talk to you about such and such. And more often than not, folks are glad to do that.
Well, it feels like you have, and I guess I never looked at fiction writers as also being investigative journalists in a way, although it's fiction, so it doesn't have to be fact, you're not, sharing fact, but you have that interest of continuing to learn, putting pieces together, growing in a subject matter, and then, fleshing that out in a story. I never really thought about it also having kind of that side to it as a writer. I think that's pretty cool. Okay, we've got more coming up next with author Joe Lee and his 7th of the Oakdale series, Resting Place, coming up next. Good things. And head on over to SuperTalkTV.com. We're continuing our conversation with author and owner of Dogwood Press, Joe Lee. He is in here promoting Resting Place, which is the 7th novel of the Oakdale series, but 9th total in your lineup, Joe. We did have a question, though, on the C Spire text line from Jeff in Oxford, and I've wondered this too, Jeff, talking about your mindset when you're putting together your novel, which is a fiction story, all the characters, all the pieces. He said, what happens if you get close to finishing writing the book and then you decide as the author you don't really like something that's at the beginning? Do you go back and fix it? Do you just let it ride? Is it too much of a conundrum to go take the eraser to it? That starts to give me major anxiety just thinking about it.
That's a great question. And as editor-in-chief of a publishing house, the authors that I work with, I tell them, let's be prepared to do whatever we have to do to make the book the best it can be. Now, Jeff's question gets into several different things. Is there something factual that's wrong that needs to be adjusted to make it correct if you're dealing with something true that happened but writing historical fiction? If you're just making things up in a general fiction novel, I would say, go back and rewrite as much as need be. And sometimes edits like that are cosmetic and don't take long. But if you determine that a big overhaul is going to be necessary, you're not going to sleep well until you've known you've made it the best it can be, especially if somebody who's going to consider it for publication may be consulted later. Of
your 9 novels, Joe, what's the average rewrites or drafts that you do per book? I doubt they're home runs every time.
The closest to home runs, the last one in particular, 40 Days, was written in a whirlwind of 75 days. At the other end of the spectrum is this one, which took almost 2.5 years to finish. And rewrites are a part of it. Also, long periods where I wouldn't call it writer's block, working on other projects, but the well was dry for a while, and all of a sudden there's that moment like, oh my gosh, this is going to work, and get started, and then there's a feverish burst of writing for a while.
See, I think that's something that independent writers or those that don't have the pressure, although you get the pros of being a bestseller and all that, but the pressure of your next book being a great hit to me would be hard to live with. I appreciate the being able to put it on the back burner, going about your everyday life, letting inspiration kind of lead you back to it. I couldn't imagine, being someone who had to write the next one that had to be as good as the last one, kind of in a time crunch, if that makes sense.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. And there are writers who've been on the bestseller list for decades, and there's pressure there. You generate that next bestseller. When you hit the road to tour for that big best-selling book today, you probably are just about finished with the one that's going to come out a year from now. I'm a big fan of suspense writers like Michael Connelly, who authored all the Harry Bosch novels, and Amazon Prime has the Bosch series. Novelist C.J. Box, who's written a bunch of really good Joe Pickett protagonist westerns over the years. But the series, where one book is going to come out every year or so and readers are looking forward to it, that's a lot of pressure. And it takes somebody who's disciplined as well as very creative.
When did you first get into novels? What was your first novel you ever read, Joe?
First novel I ever read? Oh, my gosh. I remember, other than what I had to read for school, which I probably didn't read enough of, remember getting into Stephen King in high school, which is far, far away from what I do, but I enjoyed the suspense a great deal. And over the years, writers like the late Larry Brown of Oxford, Pat Conroy, who passed away a couple of years ago, as well as the suspense writers I named. Again, one more reason I'm thankful my wife is still married to me. We've got lots and lots and lots and lots of books and bookshelves at my house.
When did you decide you wanted to give it a stab? Writing novels specifically. That's tough. That's like the that's a big deal. That's a hard thing to do.
Right at the new millennium. The first two novels are called On the Record and Dead Air, published in 2002 and 2004 originally, and they are standalone mysteries set in the Jackson area. But the first one, On the Record, was a nights and weekends project for 3 years when I still worked full-time in television. And I long talked with my wife, and I said, this will never go anywhere until I devote full-time to it. So with her blessing, I got started with a small publishing company, as much freelance work, as much part-time radio and television as I could do, and gradually began to build everything that's happening now.
What was it like when that first one was finished?
I can tell you when it was reviewed in the Clarion Ledger on the Sunday morning, I was like a little kid. I went running out to get the paper out of the driveway at about 4:30 in the morning and tore it open.
When you used to still do that?
Yeah. Yes. And I was so excited. My son was about 4. But I went and woke my wife up, and I said, gosh, look at this. It's here. This is real.
You did that.
And, that was 20 years ago. But I'm still the same 10-year-old little boy when there's a new book out. It's exciting. I'm blessed in many ways. I love what I do. And I never get tired of writing creatively.
Obviously not, at least not about Oakdale, which is your fictional town here in Mississippi, located in North Mississippi. You call it a gossipy little town. This is number 7. Let's talk about the series. When you wrote the first one in the Oakdale series, did you know that it was going to be or could be a serial book, a serial killer, a serial read, or did it kind of just morph itself into that?
Good question, and the answer is yes and no. At the time, yes, that it would be one. Judgment Day is the first one, and I had a conversation with an old friend. He was telling me about a high school football coach in real life who apparently had done some bad things, and I remember the phrase, the curtain is about to go up on his life. I remember nothing more about the conversation than that, but I think I'd had a book event in somewhere like Birmingham that day, and I had a long drive home. And by the time I got home, I had this fictional football coach in my head and a police officer in Oakdale who had played football or tried to for that coach, and that did not go well. And there was a grudge held. And I typed, made some notes, and then got up very early the next morning and made some more notes. And that was the beginning of the book Judgment Day. Now,
where did the town Oakdale get its name?
There is an Oakdale in Rankin County, not too far from where I live. And I driving out there one day, and I thought, Oakdale, that might work from my little series. There was nothing more than just seeing that that's an unincorporated area out in Rankin. And I just saw that one day while I was out in that area driving, and I thought that might be a good idea for
I bet it's a gossipy little town.
Yeah.
I'm just going to go on and sort of put that out there that it probably is. Okay, so the 7 series, the 7 books in the series, are they all within Oakdale? Are they all the same characters throughout? Or is it kind of like a series about the town and the complexities and in and out of the characters? As kind of, if you live in a town long enough from a 30,000-foot view, you could see? Or is it more about following that one family sort of through the 7 books?
What you said about the town repeating, that's what's the constant in all the Oakdale books. The second book is called the Magnolia Triangle. That takes place 7 months after the aftermath of the coach and the cop from Judgment Day. And I realized when I hit on that I could have the cloud of scandal hanging over the town as this new mystery, which involves a drowning death, a woman about 50 from an influential family. Both of her grown daughters are suspects. But I put in the cloud of scandal from the end of Judgment Day hanging over everything in the Magnolia Triangle. And I thought, I might have something here. And each book has brought forward some backstory, but not a lot. So you can pick up any of them. But I decided to set Resting Place as a prequel for two reasons, and I don't know how smart this was, but I liked 1984 and that traffic stop. That gave me the Mark Myrick III character, the young college kid who winds up intertwined with the young deputy down the stretch. And the other reason to do that was to bring in Billy Joe Stone, the deputy, when he was 25.
Andy and Jackson texted in, I bet Oakdale is on Highway 471. The moment he said that, I was like, yes, the Oakdale Animal Clinic, everything. Now we all know where Oakdale is. All right, we've got more with Joe Lee coming up next here on Good Thing Cast. We're continuing our conversation with author and owner of Dogwood Press, Joe Lee, who is in his Mississippi State gear today. And I thought, man, I really set the stage for that when you and Brian Haydad would get along great. Have you ever heard of the Thunder and Lightning podcast, or Thunder and Lightning, should I say? I put you on the spot.
Oh, absolutely. I was in college when Thunder and Lightning, Clark and Palmero, were a big deal.
We're a big deal. Okay, so Resting Place. That's number 7 in the Oakdale series, number 9 in terms of your titles as a novelist. You always seem, Joe, in all of your, at least the Oakdale, obviously it's based in Mississippi, and your other works, you have a love for Mississippi being the backdrop. I mean, just because you're from here doesn't mean you have to write about the towns or create towns like that. Why do you keep all your works very Mississippi focused?
It is because I'm from here. I love the state. I've lived in several places around the state. What they say about the hospitality state is so true. Lots of nice people here. And, you know, I don't think Dogwood Press could have been launched in New Mexico or Kansas or, you know, upstate New York or anything, because Mississippi authors, that has a ring to it that you just don't get in other parts of the country. There's a reason C-SPAN is down here every year to cover the Mississippi Book Festival. It's a big deal. There's a tremendous literary history in Mississippi.
Which is Mississippi's largest lawn party.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
Or they call it. And it's back this year.
It is, thank goodness. You know, we didn't have it in 20, we didn't have it in 21, but we should be in good shape for this year.
And that is coming up quick, fast, and a hurry. It's August the 20th. One of the most special things about that event, if you are into books, you don't even have to come in and do all the fancy table reads or hear the speakers. Panels was the words I was trying to get at. If you just come and do Author's Alley, to me is a magical place. It's free. You come and walk and you get to meet all the authors. Will you get to be there, Joe? Yeah,
we will have a Dogwood Press tent set up. We do that every year. We've got 3 or 4 authors. Candace Cox Wheeler, who is from Biloxi and a very, very talented historical fiction author. Her first book is called Cradle in the Oak, that came out a year ago. The sequel to that, set in the Roaring 20s and dealing with rum running, the practice of transporting alcohol that wasn't supposed to be transported, featuring a guest appearance by the real-life Al Capone, who had a home in Ocean Springs, Mississippi in that era. But that's a great new book. She will join us at the book festival this year. Author Randy Pierce, who Dogwood Press has published 3 or 4 times, most recently the novel Missy, he will be with us. John Floyd, my friend and short story writer extraordinaire, his most recent book is some humorous poetry. It's called Lighten Up a Little. It's just laugh out loud, get out. It's not boring poetry that we had to remember and forget back years ago. But we'll all be under the tent at the Dogwood Press tent at the festival. And you're right about Author's Alley, Rebecca. There are 60 or 70 folks now, and that's an education, just visiting with them and seeing the different books and getting to know them a little bit. An education you can't get in a textbook.
What I love about Author's Alley, also about your story, Joe, and the other authors that Dogwood Press publishes, as well as so many others throughout Mississippi, is that you can still have the dream and the vision of being a published author, and you don't have to be, it doesn't have to be the Harry Potters of the world, or it doesn't have to be, the Crawdad Sings of the world. You may get there, but it's like you can still do it. Like, you can still recognize that vision for your life and fit it into, whether you're a nurse or a teacher or whatever it may be. Like, don't give up on that dream just because you think you may not make the New York Times bestsellers list.
You couldn't be any more right about that. There are so many writers out there who do not have a contract with Simon & Schuster or Random House, yet are really, really good storytellers. And you'll find a lot of people like that at Author's Alley at the festival.
which is a lot of fun. Now we can find you in other places too. I know you'll be out doing your book tour for Resting Place. Where else across the state? Because the list is long between now and the end of August. Where all are you going to hit up?
We're going to start at Lemuria Books here in the Jackson area Thursday of this week, 5 o'clock, in-person signing, 5:30 reading. North Mississippi, Starkville at the Public Library on noon. On Thursday the 11th at noon, and then late that afternoon, also on Thursday the 11th at the Book Mart and Cafe. Back here in the capital city for the Book Festival on the 20th. Winston Public Library, Louisville, Mississippi. That's an 11:30 start on Friday the 26th. And by the end of the month, many more things to be added.
And where can they go to keep up with everything you've got going on?
Dogwoodpress.com. That is the website, and there is a little blog on there called The Little Publisher That Could, and that's fun, too.
I think that's fun. I think it's cool that you also decided to step out and help other authors take a risk on other authors who had a dream and a vision to be published. So how did Dogwood Press come about, your publishing company?
My first book was the beginning of Dogwood Press, and I remain greatly in the debt of Quail Ridge Press, the late Barney McKee, his wife, Gwen McKee, and their outstanding graphic designer and my friend Cindy Clark. I pitched on the record to them, and they told me something that was disappointing at the time, but as a publisher all these years later, I know it real well. They said, "We love this, but we are a cookbook publisher. We're not a publisher of mystery suspense." And I said, "Oh." And they said, and they helped me. They said, "At your expense, because we like this, we would like to help you get this into print at your expense." And I thought, let's give this a shot. Let's see what happens. One of those things, Rebecca, I thought if I don't do this, I'm always going to wonder what would happen if I had. And I have the best of all worlds. There was a time where I really, really wanted a nationwide contract and all the traveling and being atop the New York bestsellers list. And sure, I wouldn't turn that down. But I have the best of all worlds doing what I do and working with a lot of good authors. And when I can, maybe helping some writers who are just getting started. I get a lot more, I think, out of working with them than they probably do in working with me.
Is it just as exciting when you get one of their drafts or their pitches across your email or your desk, when you know that they've hit a home run, just as if you've, if the well springs up in you for a good story?
Yes, and there are times I'll read a query from somebody and think, my gosh, this is good. And I have to be careful how I respond, because I know when I was on that side of it 20, 25 years ago, if I got so much as a response, even if it was a form letter, I thought, well, they answered me, and maybe they're going to write back next week. And, rather than this form letter, we're going to offer you a 7-figure contract, Joe, and make you the next great big thing. But what I do is ask for something suspense-related. Give me 25 or 30 pages. That's what I want to see first when somebody interests me with a query. I can pick up what I need to. Storytelling ability, sense of time and place, the mechanics of writing, the dialogue has to be nice and crisp, like you and I are visiting here. And I guess I've done this long enough to where I can get a good sense of what I'm looking for. And at that point, I'll write back and say, this is pretty good. I'd like to read the rest of it. And it's my obligation to make very clear, this is where we are in the process. And no decisions are being made right now, but I would like to see the rest of it. Well, Mr. Lee, if you like it, you're going to offer me a contract? Let's talk about that later. Right now, you just get the rest of the manuscript to me. And that's the way I go about looking for new writers.
And Dogwood Press puts out about how many books each year? 3
or 4 books a year. And gosh, with the pandemic and getting through it, it just underscores something I've known for a long time. In-person opportunities where we can visit with other writers and possible readers and discuss our books. That's where we plant the seed and get people interested. So I'm so thankful we're in a spot now where we're having more in-person events again.
And I know people who enjoy the books too. They get to meet their author, get to hear the read, get to learn more behind it. So if we want to learn more about Resting Place or Oakdale and all the other books in the series, remind us where we can go to get it. I know you encourage to visiting your local bookstores for books as well.
Oh, yeah. Dogwoodpress.com is the website. And, ask for it at independent stores all over the place. Lorelei Books in Vicksburg, Bay Books in Bay St. Louis, Lemuria here in the Jackson area, the Book Mart and Cafe in Starkville.
Because they're small business owners, too. They need your support.
Oh, gosh, now more than ever right now.
Well, I appreciate your time, Joe.
It's my pleasure. It's good to visit with you.
Again, Resting Place, a novel by Joe Lee, if you want to check it out. But stick with us. We got more for you up next.